All right. So I want to talk now about lighting. We'll go through some different ways of lighting and also how the renderer affects lighting as well. So I've got this scene, some objects, and I want to think a little bit about how to light it effectively. So I'm just going to go and get rid of the physical sky. You know how that works. And without physical sky, a basic render is just going to have kind of a basic kind of generic light setup. It's just not going to have much at all, except for, some of the, very basic kind of overview lighting. So it's not actually light in and of itself. It's just sort of an overview of what those materials may look like, right? And actually, I'm going to get rid of this background color. Let's just create a new one. Do a new material and make it kind of a dull color with a little bit of bump. Let's just do a little bit of this. Very subtle. There we go. With that. Okay, so here's our setting. And again, with a basic kind of lighting, it's just going to be very generic, very simple, very standard. In order for us to bring some light into this scene, we could use some basic sort of Cinema 4D lighting. So here we have a variety of different types of lights that we can use. If we bring in a single light like this, it's going to be, it's called an omnilight. So it's going to be effectively illuminating in every single direction. If we render this, we're going to see our objects are lit by it. It gives us a very subtle sense of shadow on the object, but not on the ground, okay? In order for us to use shadow with a light source, we actually have to go to the Shadow tab in the Attributes Manager and give it a shadow. So if here, let's just bring our light up a little bit more into the scene first, something like this. So if we choose a shadow, first of all, the hard ray trace shadow is going to give you a look that is a very strong kind of outline shadow, right? So here we can see, the lines of the shadows are very sharp, they're very hard, they're very precise in terms of how they cast. A soft shadow map is going to be a little bit different. It is going to give you a kind of a faded, blurry kind of cast, right? It's going to be a little bit more, have a gradient almost to it. And it, again, is pretty intense with this overall white light. And then finally, an area light shadow is going to attempt to be more like you would have sort of light bouncing around and having different densities in the shadow in and of itself. So in an interior space, an area light tends to be pretty effective for the shadowing. Now, in terms of a light setup, a lot of times what lighting designers will do is they will orient a light kind of central to the camera, maybe a little bit off to one side, more forward, and have that be a main kind of light, right? So the main light is typically a little bit higher up in the scene. It's a little bit more forward. And so we get something a bit like this, considering the overall trajectory of that sort of scene. Now with the light in and of itself, you can control the color. So if you go back to general, you can change this to be slightly warmer. So if we bring this a little bit yellow, you're going to see a difference in the way that it's lit. Let's just render the picture viewer here. You can see how this looks. All right, so we're getting a little bit more yellow cast in that lighting. If we change it to more of a blue cast, then we're going to see a little bit difference in that as well, right? So here is a bit more of a blue light, and light is categorized in terms of how yellow and blue it is, in terms of the kelvins, right? So here's the more yellow, here's the more blue, and the differences between those. I prefer that main light to be a little bit warmer. So I'm just going to go with that little bit warmer light. And oftentimes what lighting designers will do is they will have some accent lights as well. So if we have this main light that's coming through, We could also add in another light. And this light, what I want to do is have the intensity, you can control the intensity of the light be less. So I'm going to go down to 50%. And I'm going to make this one actually a color. So I'm going to choose like a more of a kind of an aqua blue color, let's say, something like this for that light. And I'm going to place it over to the right side and a bit forward. Okay, something like this. I think it looks pretty good. And raise it up a little bit. And then I'm going to just copy and paste this, make another one. And this light I'm going to make more of a pinkish kind of hue, maybe closer to red. And this one, again, it's still 50%. I'm going to orient this one over on the left side of the scene. So this is something that you'll see a lot in product photography, things like that. And well, let's not do that. Let's do this. Let's render it here. So what it's going to do is give you a little bit more depth in your scene by controlling the differences between those lights. So here we have just slightly more depth. You can see in the background, the wall is slightly different color. If we go to this first view, this was just a single light. And now this is those three lights working in tandem, just to give a little bit more depth. You can especially see it on something like the sphere. This is a good example. You see the blue cast here and the red cast there, which looks pretty good in terms of dimension. Here, it's much more flat overall. So you can really control. Also notice the shadows are casting out in a different way. Now, in both of those omni-lights that I created, those fill lights, I did not add shadows to, right? So let's just see what happens if we add a shadow. Let's just do like a soft shadow for both of these and see the difference. Render this out now. We're going to get more banding and sort of striation across the scene in terms of those shadows. They're also going to be darker and intensify. You still get some of that lighting, but you get, you know, some variety of differences coming across. So here again, here is the single light. Here is the fill lights with no shadows, and then with shadows, we get a little bit more of that density in the background or density here. So it just depends about how, again, how you want it to look in terms of the scene. Now, lastly, if I see an object that I want to add more light to, like let's just say this, you know, geometric object here, if I want to add a light to that, I could bring in another light. So if I do, let's just do one more light here. Let's make this kind of a crazy color so we can really see it. Let's make this like a, maybe a really intense kind of orange. All right, so there's that light. I'm going to put this over here. Oh, I get that little sunburst, which I kind of like. Okay, and then for your lights, you have a tab in here called Project, right? So if you click on this, you can have either exclude or include for your project, right? So in this case, what I'm going to do is click include, because I only want the light to hit this object, the platonic object that I have here. Okay, so that little light that I created, you're not going to see it by the camera, but it's only going to be bouncing off of that one object. So if we render that out, you should be able to see a difference in that object in and of itself. So you have a lot of control over how you can place lighting and how it's affected by including lights for a specific object, and under project, designating which ones they are. Question?
So let's say I have a glossy object and I don't want the light to be visible, can I just do the opposite of that?
Yep. So the question was about like, if you wanted the object to be excluded, could you do that as well? And so, for example, if we got rid of this, now orange, let's see, orange should be affecting everything. Let's see what that looks like. It looks like orange is affecting nothing now. Oh, I think it's because oh, there we go. Okay, so now we're back. Orange is affecting everything. If I wanted to exclude this one, or let's say the sphere, for example, I could go and exclude and then put that one in there. Come on, you, right down there. There we go. Now the orange is affecting everything except for that purple ball, right? So that one still has the cooler kind of cast to it. So yeah, you can control what sort of setups you want to have affected by what lights accordingly. So this was just that light, and this is without that light. So let's get rid of the orange light. Actually, let's turn off all of these. So I'm just gonna click all of these off. Okay, we're back to square one with our lighting. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, let's go outside of the camera here, about a different type of light. So there's also spotlights in here. And these can be effective if you want a more moody kind of light, if you have a lamp lighting your scene, something like that. I like to use the spotlight that has a target on it. So target light is cool because it gives you a light, and plus it gives you a target. So the target starts out at 0, 0, 0. And if you move the target, the light follows it, okay? So here is really great because let's say you wanted to have the light follow this ball. It's kind of cool. You can take the target and make it a child of the sphere, that ball there. And then if I move the ball, the light follows the ball. So this is great for animation, right? You can really connect lighting and objects together. So I'll take that back out again. So the spotlight, also, if you move the light itself, the target stays put. Zoom out a little bit here. Navigate this way. If I go along the X, you see I can rotate the light, and it's always going to be trying to hit the target every time. The spotlight also has these controls, which you can control the aperture, essentially, of the light, or how wide it is, cast is, and then this has to do with how long and how thin that is. So I narrowed this down a little bit, and I lengthen this, and have the target be those different areas. All right, so this would be more of a spotlight. And of course, with that, you also have to assign a shadow too. So let's just do an area shadow. And shadow, you can change a color. I like to kind of cool down the colors a little bit. I think black is too harsh. So sometimes I'll just do like a blue or a violet, kind of really close to black, but not quite black. And then let's see what that looks like with a spotlight now. It's going to be a much different kind of cast. You definitely see the darkness in the background and that sort of effect. Now the other thing about the spotlight, and let's actually make that light a little warmer. There we go. Is we can make it visible. So we looked at this, for example, you know, when, let's go up here a little bit. Seth had a project where the snow person was being beamed up by the alien, and the visible light sort of affected it. So if you go to general and you go down here to where it says visible light, you can see that there's both visible and volumetric, right? So visible, what it's going to do is give you a look like this. The light is still there, but at the spotlight, you get this kind of hot light, right? Now, if we wanted to make it look this more believable, we can take this here, this is the visible projection, and bring it down into the scene. And this should give us more of that kind of like cast that goes across, right? This is going to be, visible is pretty good. It gives you a bit of a flat sort of look. If you want it to be more dimensional, you can use volumetric, which attempts to create a little bit more volume with the scene. And it can give you kind of a bit of that hazy sort of look as well, a bit further. So if I bring this over to the side, maybe like this, and then we look through our camera, volumetric is going to give you, it should give you a little bit of that haze on the left side as the light is starting to come in. It's very subtle. You can see it a little bit there. Let's make it more pronounced. And the way to do that would be to take and move this closer. There we go. And let's look through the camera again there. Okay. Yeah, we're starting to get more of that haze kind of coming through. So this kind of gives you a bit of the atmosphere, and you can even add a noise channel to the atmosphere to get it to be more sort of, you know, dusty and blurry and sort of things like that. But this kind of gives you that sense that there's the mist in the air, there's some atmosphere in the air, and the light is coming through and affecting it. So again, that is volumetric lighting, right? And if you go to visibility, there's a whole bunch of things you can do with fall off and shaders and everything like that, and photometric and caustics, and there's all kinds of stuff you can go into here to make it really even more detailed. But the general thing is that, you know, the shadow, the visible light, and you can have it affect those different things as well. Okay, that in a nutshell is pretty much the basics of lighting. So that is a great way of lighting. Also, the physical sky we've also talked about is a great way of lighting. You can add lights into the physical sky and kind of work back and forth. So just as a quick example, if I brought in a physical sky, it would totally change the scene, but I could make the time and location much later. And that's going to be a totally different look. So if we render this now, we should get all of that lighting kind of coming through, plus the spotlight and the light. We're getting a little bit more of the room illuminated because of the physical sky, and, you know, reflections would change because of the physical sky, sort of stuff like that as well. So that's another sort of thing of working in tandem with multiple different lights kind of coming through. Let's also look at that quickly. We'll turn off the spotlight here, and we'll turn on, oops, there we go, these lights, okay? And we should get a different sort of look for that as well. So the physical sky is going to affect, again, in combination with those different lighting sources, how your fill lights and your other lights kind of work together. All right, so that, let's see, there's not a ton difference. There's a little bit of difference. This is without the physical sky, and this is with the physical sky. So you're getting a little bit difference in the reflections. If these objects were much more highly reflective, you would certainly see the scene in a different kind of way. Actually, let's do that really quickly. So I'm just going to take this material, this object, let's just scale it down. I'll just bring it here. Whoa. Come here, there we go. And then make a new material that is reflectant. Okay. So here, you should see what gets reflected here. Okay. We're definitely reflecting the room, and you can see that this is reflecting the sky, the physical sky that's around it. It's kind of giving some of that, there's actually stars in the sky right now, things like that that are in there. If we turn the physical sky off, that reflection would look different. All right. It's probably just gonna be black. So there you go. See how the sphere now is just reflecting black. It's the nothingness of the void. So the physical sky, again, can really help to reflect those reflections. Okay, now the last thing I want to talk about with lighting is what's called image-based lighting. And what I want to do here is turn off all my lights that I had previously. Okay. All right, we're back to square one, no lighting in the scene. So what we need for image-based lighting is we need a sky, so not a physical sky, because that includes lighting and clouds and color and all kinds of stuff. This is just going to be a giant dome, a spherical dome that we put around our project. So we need a sky. And notice how it's reflecting just that grayness now on the object. And then we need to search for HDR images, okay? So these are high density resolution images, high definition resolution images, and they are they're photographed as photospheres. So if we look at one of these, for example, like this one, you see what it looks like here. So imagine taking this and wrapping it around a globe. The left side meets the right, the top meets the bottom. You're getting like a whole spherical image wrapped around. So what it would do is, if you took this, let's create a new material. And the way that you use image-based lighting is you get rid of the color, you get rid of the reflectance, and you only check on the luminance channel, okay? And then you would load in an image that is an HDR image. So this one, we're gonna drag it over here and add it to the texture. And here you can notice the concrete blocks.hdr. The extension is HDR that we're looking for. And I added some resources on Canvas of where you can find HDRI lighting resources online, and there's a whole bunch in the content browser. So that then, what we do is go to the object manager and we drag that luminance channel material onto the sky, and it will totally affect our scene. You can already see it reflected in this sphere that we created with reflection, the light that's hitting it, okay? Now, if we render this out, it's not gonna look like much. We have to change the render settings in order for this to affect. So we go to render settings, we're on physical renderer, and what we wanna do is go down to effect and select global illumination. And what this is gonna do, it's gonna be looking for luminance channels to act as lighting, okay? You can do global illumination with the physical sky and with everything else. What global illumination also is gonna do is going to calculate the way light bounces around the room and objects and scenes, okay? It's going to calculate the way that light is not just a static thing, but rather bounces and reflects and changes. So with that in mind, we're going to go to the preset default, and I'm just going to do like exterior HDR image, okay? You can definitely change these settings for different effects. For now, I'm just going to keep the preset as is, close that out, and then we'll render this. The rendering is going to take much longer than a normal physical render. Come on, mouse, you can do it. Zoom in. What it's going to do is first calculate the lighting. Ay, ay, ay. Come on. And then it's going to start to render out based on that. So you notice the look that we're getting here is different than we've seen in the other ones. It's attempting to take the light, kind of bounce it around. It's actually taking the image of the sun in the photograph and projecting it like light into the scene. So that's why you're getting these sort of glows and shadows and halos and things like that, because of that lighting. So this compared to something like this is going to be a much different type of look. It's a bit more naturalistic kind of outside look with this. The cool thing is you can change this by just simply rotating the sky, kind of like we do with the physical sky. So if I was to rotate this, I would get a much different view. And if we render that out now, we should have the light coming from a different angle into the scene. So image-based lighting can be a great way to add more of a naturalistic kind of quality to your scene, particularly if you're doing something that's, you know, in this case, doing outdoor lighting. There are also a whole lot of indoor scenes that you can grab as well. And the great thing about these is that the reflections become really, really highly realistic because they're reflecting the photograph of the scene in all those different directions. Okay, so that's, you know, pretty solid outdoor lighting, very intense kind of light kind of coming into the scene. If we change that to a different photo, let's try an interior scene here. So this one, here we go, Alex's apartment, very dull lighting. We got the TV in there, all this sort of stuff coming through. Let's see what that will do to our HDRI. So I'm gonna drag this in instead to replace that lighting. And I also wanted to show, if we look outside of the camera and we zoom out, you can see that this is all the way around our scene, right? So we're kind of getting the view of the room all the way around it in that setting. We'll go back into the camera. Okay, so in this case then, let's see what the lighting looks like. It's going to be much duller, a different color, a different cast. There's not really a real direct sense of lighting with this scene, but you can certainly bring other things into it. Okay, yeah, so you can totally see this is much different. Taking longer to render. It's a bit more to calculate here. No hard shadows really, pretty dull overall, and kind of a dim kind of quality of lighting. I would say this would not be my favorite to choose, but it may work for your scene. You don't know, it might work. So I recommend that you experiment with these different types of lighting and play around with what they can do to improve your scene. Yeah, definitely much different than this or this. That one is, I like that one. That one's pretty good. This one, still going. Very dim kind of lighting. All right, let's try one more and then let's talk a little bit about, let's see, this one. It's gotta be a better interior one. It's brighter. Maybe this one. Okay, this one seems like it's brighter. Let's try that. Yeah, this is better. You can already tell that. You can tell in the early image bounce how it's going to be lit and where some of the shadows are going to go. This definitely looks a little more like an indoor kind of quality. Still has that intensity of the light from the window coming in, but gives you some pretty good subtle kind of quality of lighting. So, you know, even if we click now between these, this is definitely like an outdoor sort of quality of lighting. The light is much cooler, more blue, right? The shadows are a little bit harsher, more intense. And then here, more subtle, kind of softer tones, more subtle quality of lighting coming through. Okay, one last thing about this type of lighting is, oh, let me just show you this as well. So sometimes this, we're losing some information here, especially in this yellow object. There's one more thing you can add to your render that can help in the render settings, which is called Ambient Occlusion. This is also going to add a bit of time to your render. But what that's going to do is look for all the corners and geometry where things are meeting and add a little bit of noise there. So let's see what that looks like now. Again, it's going to add a little bit more time. What you should get, especially in like that yellow object, I'm predicting that you'll see more of the geometry because the ambient occlusion is going to attempt to create a little bit more noise where surfaces are meeting the ground, where edges are coming together. It'll add a little bit more grain to your scene, but sometimes that can be effective too. And for some of the finer details like bump channels, it should give you a little bit more detail across the surface. So even in these flat objects now, we can see a difference underneath them, especially kind of where the sphere meets the ground. It's still getting washed out a little bit with that yellow object, but we're getting more of the details coming through. So from that washed out kind of look to a little bit more of those details. So ambient occlusion can give you just a little bit more of that noise to give you some of those details coming through. Okay, and then finally, I just want to talk, because we're using global illumination that is looking for luminance channels and bouncing light around, we can also create our own materials that have luminance channels. So we click a new material, go to color, turn off reflectance, and actually I'll keep reflectance on. And click on luminance and just make a, you know, maybe we'll make a really intense green color for our scene, okay? And if we create a new object, I'll just make like a glow stick kind of a thing. Can't tell you how many of these glow sticks my kids have used. Okay, something like that. There we go. So if I put this on here, and actually what I'm going to do is also increase the brightness from 100 to, let's say, like 300, just so we can see it better. If I render this out now, that is going to also act like a light. So you can have that affect your scene as well. All right. So now you can see that glow stick is glowing. It's bouncing light into the scene. It's seeing the reflections, and it's starting to become a bit more of that intensity. So you could have things illuminate, you can have them glow, and it'll act like those sort of lighting sources as well. Okay, so I will open it up to questions about lighting. If you guys have any. Well, ultimately what I'd like to do is have a discussion with each of you individually about how you want your scene to be lit and what's the best type of lighting to use for it. So some of you, simple spotlights will be perfect. So for some of you, you really want to have more of that realistic, naturalistic look, and you want to do some image-based lighting. So we can discuss, the scene, what you're looking for, and how to use lighting effectively. So make sure that I know what you're looking for as we go into that. All right, so questions from the chat or from the class. Does anybody have a lighting scenario that they are definitely one? So we did talk about being lit by outdoor windows, right? So that, that can be a way to start to think about using you could try the image-based lighting. Like that first one that I was doing here could be a really effective one for your scene if you set up the geometry accordingly. You may need to put, I don't know how your window scene is set up, but you may actually need to put a ceiling on and stuff like that to encapsulate it, so it's more like what a room would be like. But that could be a good way to sort of see what type of lighting kind of bounces into the scene as well. Other types of lighting, what are you thinking about, David?
For my lighting, I have two objects that emit light.
Okay.
It's going to be the main light sources, but I also want like a very dim atmosphere, like something you can see.
Okay, so that's a good. So David is thinking about having things lit from a screen, and so that could be a cool way to use the Luminance channel. I don't know. Let's just see if there's. I wonder if there's something in here already. Let's see if there's a.
I was going to ask you, like, could you put a light in the middle of that sphere, the purple sphere, because the other sphere is transparent.
Yeah, and it will emanate out. Sure. So I'm just going to open up a new. Whoops. I'm just going to try. Let's just try something here. Let's bring in this laptop. All right, and let's give it a basic floor. Let's go to the window here. Bring in this thing. Okay, let's take the laptop, crank this up. Let's see if we can get the laptop to be lit by the screen. I'm just curious. Well, we need to have a friend in here too, I think. Something that we can bounce light onto. Oops. Okay, so laptop is here. Let's just put it here. Okay, so let's see what this is made of here. The buttons, a trackpad, the lid, the body, main panel. Where's the screen? Main. What is this? This is the hard part, finding where things are. The lid, maybe? Cube. That's the bottom part. The main. Is that this? It looks like this might be the screen color. Let's just see what happens if we. Okay, that looks like the screen color to me. Yeah, all right. So let's take this, make it like a blue color. Let's just get rid of the reflectance for now. Oh, the brightness. Okay, let's try to give this a luminance channel instead. And go to our physical renderer and global illumination and interior preview. That's probably good enough. Let's see what we get. So it's pretty intense, but it's definitely being lit by the screen, right? So that could be a cool way of thinking about using global illumination and a luminance channel. I'm just curious about what 100 would look like.
I could layer an image to the material, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think you could. Let's look at this first, and then we will add an image. Sorry for the mute. Too many screens up. So that's pretty good. And then I'm curious. Who knows what I'll get? Here, we'll do this Windows one, right? Okay, let's see what happens if on the luminance channel, we load an image in here, screen. All right, we got that screen on there, and I'm curious. There you go. Sliding from the image, yeah. So yeah, I mean, that could be a really cool way to just light your whole scene, is to use the global illumination, luminance channel, photos, kind of like build that in as a way to, it doesn't even need to be a high definition image. I mean, you're not getting the greatest color coming through, but I think it still looks pretty believable.